Welcome to the Table Podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we give you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to The Table, the podcast where student-life professionals, educators, and change makers come together to share stories, insights, and ideas for building community where everyone belongs. I'm your host, Bridget Johnson, founder of the Dean's Roundtable and longtime student-life professional. Each episode, we'll hear from people doing the hard, hopeful work of creating more just, compassionate, and restorative communities. So pull up a chair and let's get started. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Beth Small and Julia Getty, two incredible educators and leaders from the International Institute for Restorative Practices, who are helping schools and organizations around the world rethink how we build, sustain, and restore community. Beth is the Director of Continuing Education Instruction at the IIRP Graduate School, where she oversees curriculum development, supports instructors, and designs innovative professional learning and restorative practices. She's also a lecturer, counselor, and frequent presenter who spent more than 2 decades advancing restorative approaches across education, justice, and community systems. Julia is an instructor and implementation coach with IIRP, working with public, independent, and higher institutions nationwide. Before joining IIRP, she spent a decade in independent schools developing wellness curriculum and serving as 8th grade dean and director of secondary school placement. Julia's work bridges restorative practices and human wellness, helping communities create intentional, authentic connections that sustain both individual and collective health. Together, Beth and Julia bring both depth and practicality to this work, and I'm so excited to explore what restorative culture looks like in schools today. So happy to have them both here. And I just have to say that Beth was also my instructor. Like, she was one of the first teachers I had at IIRP when I started on this road to getting my master's. And I am almost done with that road. I am in my last course before I do 699, which is the paper writing research paper final product for IIRP. So, like, that was 2 years ago, Beth. It's kind of crazy.
That is crazy. Wow.
So Julia and I just met, and I learned that all the work that she was doing in independent schools and how she started to open the doors for independent schools to do more work with restorative practices. And so really appreciate that. And so excited to have them both here today. And so how are you guys doing?
Good. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. So let's jump right in. So this question is for both of you. Like, what drew you into restorative work in the first place? And what continues to keep you here?
I can go first if you want.
Absolutely.
So, like you said in my intro, Bridget, my original interests were really around holistic health and wellness. And at some point in that journey, I realized the importance of connected and authentic relationships to overall well-being, whether that was for children or adults. And then when I learned there was a whole field dedicated to making relationships stronger and especially to repairing harm when it occurred, I was totally hooked. And I'm also fascinated by the balance of accountability and support that comes with restorative practices. It's the heart of the work. And I honestly believe that balance is the secret to success in so many areas, like including
Absolutely.
parenting, government, social work, criminal justice, and of course, education.
So my journey here was not nearly as, I think, linear as Julia's. Restorative practices found me. I did not find it. I graduated from college 25 years ago, I guess, at this point, with a degree in education, ready to be a social studies teacher, and I couldn't find a job anywhere. Like, that's my joke nowadays. Of, like, in a district, I'm sure you could hire me before I left. So I had to pivot very quickly and started working at a Boys and Girls Club, and I loved it. And the work was really meaningful, but it was my community of actually my sorority. I had several of my sorority sisters were working at the IIRP's model programs, Community Service Foundation and Boxmont Academy. So they're like, well, come join us. We're doing this thing. And it's restorative practices, and our founders are. So I, in 2002, started working for the model programs and the drug and alcohol outpatient program. And it changed my life. And really changed the trajectory of what I thought my professional career was going to be. So a series of happy accidents got me here.
I love that, happy accidents. And for me as well, like I had not heard of the IRP before 3 years ago when someone came to my conference and presented on it. I was like, huh, that seems like I might like that. But as someone who had not gone back to school to get any sort of master's, that was a little bit of a daunting task at my age. We won't say what that is, but I have really enjoyed it and it's been a real eye-opening experience for me. So I'll ask you guys both this question as well. Like what keeps you in this work? Why do you continue to do this work after so long, Beth and Julia?
I can't imagine doing anything else. And I've shifted along the way from
Sure.
direct service to training to teaching at the graduate school. I think one of my joys is watching people get excited about the work.
Ah,
And I half jokingly say I get to build relationships for a living, and that has always been what it felt like. So, in a new school and a new class starts, it's all just starting fresh again and building those connections in those communities. So, I just can't imagine doing anything differently at this point.
well, that's awesome. How about you, Julia?
Uh, I guess, like I was saying earlier, the universality of the
Mm.
work. When I do trainings, I always have someone who immediately can see, I'm going to use this with my kids, or I'm going to use this with my adult mother or my elderly mother, or I could use this in the club that I am vice president of, or whatever it might be. Just think everyone can learn more how to engage with other people in a way that is more connecting. And especially that part about repairing relationships. So many of us have never had any kind of training or formal thought around, like, what do I do when I disagree with someone or someone says something to me that is not sitting well? It's a skill that some people are naturally good at and some people are
Hmm.
not.
Not so much.
And so for those who are naturally good, they take this work and go, yes, of course. Yes, this makes sense. And the people who are not so good go, oh, and it kind of helps them get there.
So, why don't we take a step back for a minute? Because I know a lot of my audience knows and has heard restorative practices before, but for those folks who are new to the term or the idea of restorative practices, you guys want to kind of take a stab at talking about exactly what that is?
Yeah, when I'm asked for the elevator speech or the shorthand. For me, restorative practices is a way that we intentionally build, sustain, and restore relationships in any sector, right? In order
Hmm.
to build stronger communities.
Awesome. That was a very succinct. I'm going to take some notes
Please,
on that.
please.
Julia, did you want to jump in and add?
Sure. And this is not nearly as succinct, but if I have time to go into a couple of extra minutes, a lot of times I'll say restorative practices is a little bit of a misnomer, and that I actually wish it was called relational practices as a
Mm,
field, because when people hear restorative, they think it's only about the repair of harm. But so much, as Bridget, so much of restorative practices is the proactive energy that
yeah.
goes into building relationship and trust and social capital and all of those things first, because if you don't have that, there's nothing to
To
restore.
restore too, right. People forget about that piece that you have to restore something, but if nothing is there, you can't restore it. It's not how that works. So we've had some trying times. Like we are living in some times that have been really stressful and challenging for people. And so as you think about this past year, what's one challenge and one joy that really stands out for you all?
Beth and I actually talked about this, and so I'm going to talk about the challenge, one that is standing out for me. Oh, actually, maybe two. Certainly, and I'll call them external ideological divisions that are plaguing our society right now. And what happens is that they end up coming into the school space along with students, families, and staff, and then they become internal. And so there's a fear factor around these conversations. How do we respectfully and effectively address these issues in ways that honor the needs of everyone? And the more contentious a topic is, we've learned, and we try to help others see, the more contentious it is, the more planning, the more preparation, and the more
Hmm.
structure needs to be applied to that conversation. So there's that, which again has always been a challenge, but I think it's just hit a peak now. I hope it's the peak. Yeah, I hope it's going to start to plateau.
Me too.
And of course, an issue plaguing all schools, public, private, whatever, is funding, and whether it's federal or state funding, the uncertainty around funding right now, or in the case of many independent schools, family retention, and how do we help our community see the value of independent school education so that we can have enough folks to keep the doors open and the lights on, right?
Yeah. Need that.
So I'm going to talk about the joy
Okay.
of work, if possible. Yeah, and I agree with everything that Julia said around the division. I think the joy is folks still finding ways to do this, still finding ways to center community, still finding ways to intentionally be building connection amongst the divide. And how are we reaching out? How are we doing this work but not calling it by a name that could lose funding, making it fit into our systems? I think that's, Julie and I talk about this a lot. That is one of the things that is great about independent schools is, and we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, as we go through, is just making that work their own. So again, finding ways to be creative. Another joy, the IARP's World Conference is happening next week. And
It is.
again, I know it's not as many people as we've had in the past, but the artists that are coming, the theme is around art integration, and that's something we haven't explored in this way before. And I think that's going to bring a lot of joy to a lot of people. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think that's where I'm finding and drawing some hope right now.
That's awesome. Definitely something to be excited about. So let's talk about restorative practices in schools. Schools sometimes try to treat restorative practices like a separate program or a box to check. From your perspective at the IRP, what happens when RP gets segmented out instead of being woven into the daily fabric of school life?
Yeah, I can start this one.
Okay.
There are so many things we could touch on here. But first, I want to acknowledge that there's nothing wrong with programs. People like programs. So educators like to have a guide that says, if this happens, then do this, right?
Right.
There's safety in that. It's a tool in the toolbox, and it feels like it gives us options, right? And to be completely honest, restorative practices can be that. It can be another tool in the toolbox. The more effective applications of restorative practices are when we really look at it as, it's not just thinking about what are you going to do, it's thinking about why are you doing it, right? What are the goals and underlying values and mindsets, right, behind building community and a relationship. And so there are structures you can put in place that help us engage with each other more effectively. When we are talking about this in that sort of, I'm sorry, I just lost it. Can I pause?
That's okay. Yep, you can absolutely pause.
All right, so 5 seconds and then start again. Yep. Okay. So many things I think are important to keep in mind when we're talking about applying restorative practices to schools. So first, I want to acknowledge that there's nothing wrong with programs. People like programs. Educators like to have a guide that says, if this happens, then do this. It's a tool in the toolbox. We feel safer knowing that if we just apply that tool, that things will get better, or hopefully. And that can be true even of restorative practices. There are structures you can put in place that help us engage with one another more effectively. There's no doubt about that. What's different, though, about restorative practices is that when you begin to understand the origins of the practices, why were they developed, and what are the goals behind them? Why am I doing this? You begin to realize that it's not just something you do, it's more of a way of being. It's an intentional mindset shift, or numerous mindset shifts, from transactional to relational, from reactive to proactive, from me to we. So sometimes when you say it's a way of being, people get a little nervous about that.
Oh yeah, they don't like that.
It's a little culty or a little like a bit much. But when people understand that what we mean is that way of being is that mindset shift to a more relational way of being, is that what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it's also that intentionality that kind of not scares people, so to speak, but helps them realize like, oh, this isn't a box I can check quickly.
Mm.
Like I can just do this and move on. Like I'm gonna actually, it's gonna need some time and effort, and people get tired. It's not, they don't feel like they have the time to devote to this. But I have also seen where schools like just give me the list of things I need. Just tell me how to do it. I'm like,
Yeah.
see, that's not how it works. And if you do it that way, you're gonna have people rolling their eyes and like, this thing again, and then you won't have the lasting change that you want. But if you do take the time and think about how you're building relationships intentionally, and think about the V word vulnerability, which people don't like to feel uncomfortable in that way. That's when the real change happens. But we've got to convince people that it's worth their time and effort.
Mhm.
And people in this fast-paced world, everyone wants microwave results.
Mhm.
That's a little harder lift.
Yeah. I think we do really miss an opportunity when we're not focusing on adult work as well. That this
Uh
isn't just
huh.
we're gonna bring this in to work with our kids better, right? To change our discipline numbers, to increase sense of belonging, all
Yep.
good things. But I think it becomes incomplete when we're not at all talking about adult culture and what that can look like so that it can be modeled as well.
Absolutely. Modeling is so important. And if you kids are watching us all the time, right? And so we want them to be restorative, but at the other time, not being restorative to our colleagues. What
Yeah.
are we doing?
Mhm.
So, Julia, you work closely with independent schools. What unique opportunities and challenges do you see in those settings compared to public or charter?
Yeah. Oh, wow. What a great question, because there are so many opportunities. The potential at independent schools, I think, is truly unlimited. Bridget, I don't know if you feel this way sitting through your grad school classes, but when I was getting my master's at the IIRP, I just remember sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, independent schools could use this so much. They could take it and run with
Absolutely.
it. So the opportunities are vast. And it's interesting because most independent schools were founded with community in mind. I suspect if you read every mission of every independent school, 95% of them would have the word community in there, right? So it's in their DNA. They understand the importance of community connection. They're also relatively small. So they're able to determine their own missions and visions and traditions and curricula. And if they try something that's not working, then they're nimble enough to adjust and try something
Right.
else, right? Um, their missions usually involve something about knowing and valuing each child. And that's very aligned with restorative practices. Again, some people are very naturally good at that sort of thing, and others
Mhm.
not so much, right? So for those who need a roadmap or a guide to like, how do I connect better with students? This can help. They also have very strong parental involvement, of course, and some might see that as a strength or a challenge.
Yeah, yeah.
But when parents understand that restorative practices actually increases voice and agency for their child and even for themselves in the community, so I get pretty excited about that. And when what parents also get excited about is when they realize that their children, through experiencing restorative practices in a school, are learning essential skills like listening, storytelling, empathy building, how to express their thoughts and their feelings, and of course, resolving conflict.
Mhm.
These are all skills that they're going to need to be happy, healthy, successful in the future. These kids are I say this often is almost a cliche, but it's so true. These kids are our future leaders, right? They're our future
They
teachers,
are.
doctors, lawyers, artists, judges, and parents, right? They're our future parents. And learning how to effectively relate to others can only make them better, right? At all of those roles.
Absolutely. I love all of that. And so, Beth, from your experience across schools and organizations, what patterns have you noticed in how communities succeed or stumble when
Mhm.
trying to implement restorative practices?
Yeah, I mean, I'm learning more and more about implementation science, so it really blowing my mind, right? In a lot of ways as to, yeah, this isn't just like go to a training and go try things,
No.
right? I will say though, I do think the smallest of implementation can be effective from like the one educator who goes to a training or a workshop and begins to try something new in their classroom, right? I think that one of our graduate courses Restorative Practices in Action really does focus on those micro movements. Dr. Gina Abrams will talk about like taking this workout for a spin. Well, I do believe there's value in that individual micro level. I'll say some of the best larger scale implementations that I've either been a part of or I've seen is a simultaneous top down, bottom up. So there is a strong push, commitment from at the top of the hierarchy. So whether that's
Mm-hmm.
in a public school system, a superintendent or a cabinet, in a independent school, head of school, like that, they know about it. There's not many superintendents or heads of school that I meet who are like, oh, thanks for coming. We love this work. But when I have, that always is very kind of reassuring in a way. So the reason that leadership can start this work is so that there is a unified message. There
Right.
is an opportunity for clear expectations, that everyone isn't doing something different. They also hold the purse strings.
Mm-hmm.
So if the leadership is willing to put the money to this, that's also going to support. I will say if there's not some groundswell buy-in, almost grassroots of the folks in the classroom, in the schools, in the counseling programs excited about this, though, then it could potentially
Yeah,
fall.
it's really hard.
So it's got to be both kind of happening at the same time. And that's where I definitely have seen the best. I think the stumbles, first, there's an amazing article that came out in 2020 called The
Mm.
Starts and Stumbles of Restorative Justice Practice and Education.
Oh, okay.
And it's written by Anne Gregory and Catherine Evans. And they do a beautiful job of kind of pooling all of the research and honing in on what they're calling misimplementation models. So it's important for, again, that leadership to understand what can potentially get in the way. So I would
Right.
definitely suggest taking a look at that article. One of the things, or a couple things in addition to that, I would say is, again, not setting those clear expectations. So do the folks sitting in the training or getting the coaching know what they're supposed to do with it? Are there other competing commitments? So are we saying we want to do restorative practices and we're all in on this, but yet something else is getting in the way? Those have to be fleshed out. And once an implementation has started or happened, I think lack of follow-up. If we're not,
Yeah.
we go to the doctor, we should go to the doctor every year, whether we need it or not, right? For that.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that means it's someone from the IARP coming in to check up or that you're just getting out of your echo chamber. So going to a conference, listening to a podcast, checking yourself against what we've been doing. Because I think if we're not getting that follow-up or that check-in,
Yeah.
it start to
It's
fall away.
crucial.
Yeah.
It's critical. And one of the things that, a couple of things that you said that I want to touch on. You said resources. Well, you said money, but I also think of resources as time.
Human resources.
So it is
Yeah.
super important that not only do they put the money towards the implementation, but the time and give it the proper space it needs, whether it's not letting other competing things kind of outshine or the beauty of the debrief and the follow up. Because that's the other thing that I think schools could do a little bit better with. They check the boxes. They're great about checking the boxes, but they don't circle back around and like, are we okay here? Can we just check in and like, let's see how everyone's doing. Let's see how we can kind of hone what we're doing and be better. We've checked the box and we're moving on. And so, because that's the nature of trying to be productive and saying we've done the thing and giving accolades to all the people who went to the training, but then you don't talk about it for 18 months and people are like, what? Well, oh, I forgot. Yeah, we did do that thing back then. And then it can get stale pretty quickly if
Yeah.
you don't continue to kind of refresh and get people talking about it on a regular basis, having people come to your school that can give you some additional kind of fuel to the fire, so to speak. So, with that said, we talked about kind of these micro movements or small steps that can really help to build momentum because that's what you need, right? You need that momentum. Do you have some examples that capture that kind of slow, steady progress that can be helpful for schools or organizations? Not just talking about schools today.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I really do believe that small intentional steps are the best way to first of all, to get everyone involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Slowly, steadily, clearly. Doing too much too soon is often overwhelming,
Right.
both for the educators trying to implement the practices, but also for students and families on the receiving end, because they don't really understand, what is this new thing? Why are we doing this? People tend to be resistant to change in general, right?
Right.
So bringing them along, giving them the chance to ask questions, to even dissent and say like, are we sure this is the right way to go, the right thing to be doing is important. And people are especially resistant to change if they are not personally feeling urgency to change.
Right.
Right. So everything's fine.
Exactly.
Why do we need to do anything different? So sometimes it takes time for people to say, oh, wait, maybe things aren't as fine as I thought. Right. It also allows people to gradually build skills from their mistakes. Again, giving voice to folks around the why and how this will impact different people at different times and in different ways. And it also gives you a chance to adjust. So I said earlier, the independent schools have the advantage of being small, relatively small and nimble, right? So if they are doing this very intentionally and slowly, they can measure what's working, what's not working, and adjust. It also builds trust in the processes, which then leads to less fear, more experience among the adults. So then when they're applying this to students, they have more confidence and more understanding of exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. And then we also, and this comes in strongly in our trainings, we really encourage educators to think about being restorative with themselves first. And so if we define being restorative as that balance of accountability and support, how can I apply that balance to me, to the things I'm doing, to the challenges I'm facing? And then when we're kind of a little more comfortable with that, now start thinking about how do I apply this to the people immediately around me, the people that I speak to every day, that I have the strongest relationships with, or that I have relationships with that need to be stronger. And then thinking about the community-wide efforts. What policies, what procedures, what traditions at our independent school perhaps aren't the most restorative, right? I think about changing those because families are often very attached to the way independent schools have done things for a very long time. And so that can take time to adjust.
And I would say also the faculty as well can sometimes get kind of really hung up on some of those traditions. Like that's what we've always done, even though it might not be the best. But it's part of the fabric of the school. And so getting folks to understand and realize that maybe that fabric needs to change color a little bit or be strengthened in a different way. It's sometimes hard to get people to see and understand without actually looking introspectively. I like the fact that you said that kind of starts with yourself first, because we always want to go and like do the things for other people because that's the easier piece, right? Instead of like taking a moment and looking at ourselves and like, what do I need to do differently? How can I model being restorative better? Like, what am I doing in my relationships that might cause harm? And so if we're not doing that ourselves, it's really hard. I mean, we can do as I say, not as I do, right? We can wag the finger and say, be more restorative. But if we're not, it's really hard to tell people to do that themselves. So trust is, oh, go ahead.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. No, jump right in.
I want to, while we were still on talking about adults, you're shining that light there. Earlier, you were asking about the opportunities and challenges with independent schools. And there are a couple of challenges that I wanted to mention around the adults, because I think it's very related to what we're talking about here. And one is that everyone who works at an independent school knows that they're going to have to build relationships with kids, or at least they should, right? Like that's
so.
But often where the relationship ball, so to speak, gets dropped is that inter-adult relationship piece, right? So teacher to teacher to admin, admin to admin, admin to parent, parent to parent, right? Like we often don't put the same energy and intention into building and sustaining those relationships. And so when the adults don't have methods available to them to get to know each other proactively, to understand each other's values, to hear about each other's experiences, and of course to repair harm caused by interpersonal disagreements, they can end up being kind of unhappy, right? And even maybe leaving the community. And when a school loses a beloved teacher or a family due to bad feelings, it impacts the cohesion of the school for those who are left behind. And let's face it, we were talking about keeping those doors open. It can impact the school's reputation and even their financial bottom line. right? So attending to those adult relationships is good for everyone, including the adults, and including the students and the families. And then the second piece that's adult related that comes up quite a bit. I have to say, I didn't recognize this at first until I really started working with a number of independent schools. The second challenge that I was thinking about is the hierarchy, the traditional hierarchical authority structure that's present in many schools. And that's present in all sorts of organizations. But that hierarchy can be a little bit of an impediment to human connection and validation.
Yes.
So, and I'm not saying we get rid of the hierarchy, right? Hierarchy is useful when we're talking about job responsibilities or level of technical expertise, but they can really be toxic to relationships. As soon as we decide that one person's thoughts and feelings and experiences are more important than another person's thoughts, feelings, and experiences, the community's in trouble. And in some schools, publicly disagreeing with the head or the board chair is professional suicide.
Suicide, yeah.
When actually research shows that diversity of thought strengthens organizations and strengthens leadership. So we need to create that space for diverse voices, for questions, even for dissent, actually, right? Because those things respectfully and productively expressed make a community stronger. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention those because they were definitely uppermost on my mind.
No, I appreciate that. And you talk about trust, and you don't have relationships are built on some level of trust there. And one of the terms that I learned in my courses in the last year is cyber safety. And so that's not something we've kind of talked about up to this point, but you have to have that to be able to, or the courage at least, if you don't feel like you're necessarily psychologically safe, the courage to be that dissenting voice or say, raise your hand like, I don't really agree with that, or maybe there's a different way to do this. And that's really hard in places where the hierarchy is pretty strong and you don't buck the system. And if you're different in a lot of ways, you're not kind of the minority in terms of the voice, it's really hard to feel like that your voice matters. And so building those relationships and having shared values and building that trust is absolutely critical in organizations where you want to have change. You want to have, what's the word I'm looking for? You want to be a place where you can have that tension between those who agree and disagree so that you can be a better place, just in general. And so sometimes people are nervous about being a better place because they are so comfortable with where they are and they don't want to change. They're like, no, this is good. I'm warm, I'm cozy. Like, why do I want to do anything different? And for us to grow and be better organizations, communities, societies, we have to have that tension there to be able to say, I think that was okay for a time, but now we need to do something a little bit different. So I appreciate that. Thank you for bringing that up. So we have talked about community and we've talked about relationships and belonging. We talked about kind of those micro steps. Do you guys want to share a story where you witnessed kind of a breakthrough moment for a student or community, a moment that made you think, this is why I do this work?
Yeah, I've got one. So it's interesting. Beth and I were chatting about this earlier. We often don't get to witness the moments firsthand. We come in, we teach, we leave, we might pop back in, and then we get to hear stories, right? And they say, oh yeah, I tried this and this is what happened. And we love that. So I'm thinking one of my favorites is actually a story that could have really gone a completely different direction. There was a dispute. It was an outside of school dispute, which in and of itself is something that schools are starting to really have to handle, right? Because social media, all of those things, that dividing line between out of school and in school is much fuzzier today. But there was a dispute that had happened out of school between two students, and the conflict involved identity. One student was Black, the other was white. And the school had been using restorative practices for about a year. And they decided this might be a good opportunity to try a formal restorative conference. So formal conferencing is not something we do every day. It's usually reserved for sort of the higher level incidents that are maybe a little bit more sensitive, where we really have to make sure everybody's having the opportunity to participate and process, right? And there's a lot of preparation that goes into conference. And so I was told that after everyone being fully prepped for the interaction, that the mother of the Black student still had a lot of doubts. So she'd seen schools try to handle incidents like this before, and she knew how they typically played out, which was not always well for her child. So she, again, the way it was told to me was she was already considering what school might my kids go to next year, right? Like, where are we going to go if this doesn't go well? But after the conference was over, she was incredibly impressed with the process. She couldn't believe how effective it was as far as allowing everyone to speak and be heard and to collectively come together with a solution, how to move forward, how to repair the harm, etc. Not only did the family end up staying at the school, but that once doubtful mother actually spoke at graduation and named that restorative intervention as a major reason that they were happy with their overall experience. So
awesome.
That's one of my favorites. Yeah.
That's definitely a good one.
Yeah. I can just add one.
Go right ahead.
It was a staff one. I actually just thought of this as we were talking. I was working with a pretty large school district, and particularly with a group of elementary principals, assistant principals, and we're doing a listening circle workshop. And it was very impactful. Each group kind of talked about a challenge they were experiencing. The principals, as we were debriefing, raised their hand and was like, "So Beth, how long do we listen before we start to do something? Like, when do we actually
when can I jump in?
Right, about this? Like, okay, this is great. I want to be heard, but now what?" And because it was an intact group, it was all in one school. And I said, "That's a great question." I said, "Look, we can look around the room and see these themes. This is where it's April. This is where you're all feeling. This is how you're feeling in April. My guess is you'll feel this way again next April if we don't do anything with this." So what I could do is take all of this information and march it down to your assistant soup's office and say, "This is where your principals are today in April. We're listening. Now what? How do we turn this listening into action?"
Yeah.
So she was amazing. She was so open, really, to just about anything.
Okay.
She was on this road. She was ready to do this. So we took the themes. We kind of came up with like 5 areas: work-life balance, feeling overwhelmed, a lot of different things. And in July of that year was their back to school principal academy.
Yeah.
And I said, "Would you give me a couple hours carved out to turn this into action, to do problem solving circles around the themes?"
Okay.
So she was like, "Yes." So we took the 5 areas, we sent them out to the principals, we asked them to rank them in order of importance. And we also said, if you weren't at this particular listening circle and your struggle is not represented, please add it. And then we came up with kind of the top 10 and we worked through. I ended up doing two workshops, and we did it as a traditional problem solving circle in a fishbowl. And we had an inner circle and an outer circle, and it was a community problem. It wasn't just one person, but one person jotted down the notes. And for that last part of the circle where you say one thing I'm gonna try, one thing I'm gonna do, we passed the suggestions around and everyone said one thing that they're going to try or one thing that they're going to do. So we had this opportunity, but I don't think if that principal wouldn't have raised their hand and said, "How long do we listen?" that it was kind of almost like everyone had a little breakthrough from that moment to the assistant soup to the group saying, "Yeah, we're going to do this." And one person said, "I can't do any of this right now. Like, we're about to open the doors tomorrow, maybe in September." So the follow-up was we typed everything up and said, "Don't look at this till September."
Okay.
Right. If that's going
to, yeah.
Right. So it became this collective of just this one process that led to this process that led to that process.
I love that. That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that, Beth.
Yeah.
Restorative work asks us to balance accountability and compassion, which isn't always easy. And so how do you navigate that tension in your practice and help others navigate that tension as well?
Yeah, I think I'll start, and Julia, please feel free to jump in. This is a really interesting space. When I hear this question, I think about, for me anyway, authority and influence. I don't have a ton of authority. I really don't. Like, at the end of the day, I make decisions very rarely on my own. Even as a lecturer, like, yes, I do the grading, right? But People give me the work to grade. It's not,
Right.
this arbitrary thing. So I think I'm gonna speak from my role as a lecturer and my role as working with schools. I think
Hmm.
in our courses, we're an online institution primarily. I try really hard to create a culture of accountability and compassion as a collective, right? So from that first live Zoom session,
Yep.
how do we want to create agreements? I want to be really clear about expectations. I want to model vulnerability and humility so that when there is a concern, it can be raised to me in a way that students feel comfortable about doing that. And I don't know if you remember this, Bridget. You did raise an issue
I
when
do.
we were in class
I
together.
do remember.
I was on, another person is teaching that course right now, but I joined her last night for the listening circle. We fundamentally changed the way we taught that unit based on your courage to say, this isn't sitting well with me. And hopefully the conditions we created as a community to allow that to happen. So it goes both ways. It's not just the accountability of I'm the leader and the students, but it's accountability of me as well
Mm.
as the one with the influence, right? With the perceived power or influence. I think the rest of my role, right, when I'm working with districts or schools or organizations, I really have no authority, whether
Yeah.
they listen to what I'm doing or even if they want me to be there. So
Right.
here I am rolling in. Okay, it's the end of the year. It's the beginning of the year. I want to be in my classroom. I want to be doing all these other things.
Right.
So it's another space to just really try to lean in, ask questions, do my best to understand. I must say often, I think Julia, you say something similar, like, it's not lost on me, I'm going home after this. And you're
Right.
going back to the building. There's something to be said for naming that. So I try really hard to lean into influence. And when things do kind of go off the rails a little bit, like really zeroing in on dissent versus disrespect. And we can dissent and not
Absolutely.
agree and still honor one another. So
Be respectful and maintain that dignity, which is also a word that we haven't used today, but that was something that's not a word that I had really kind of was not in my vocabulary. Like I knew the word, but I never used that word. It was, I don't know, to me, some kind of far off thing like dignity. Like that's something my parents have. Do I have dignity? Am I old enough to have dignity? I'm not even sure. But it's something to be said about thinking about people having dignity and being respectful and how easily that can be torn down by just how you approach a conversation or approach disagreement. And oftentimes we approach disagreement with kind of the I, the me, instead of the you or the we. And it can be hard and get us down a rabbit hole that it's really hard to kind of climb out of. This work can be incredibly rewarding, but also deeply draining. And so, how do you personally sustain yourselves, and what does resilience look like for you all?
do you want to go first, Julie, or do you want me to?
Go ahead, Beth. I want to think about this one a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a processor. Like I talk. I'm a talker. I journal, but I really want to get it out, right? And not
Yeah.
just when things aren't going well, but even when things are going great. Like I have to tell somebody about this amazing thing that just happened. So for me, it's having some trusted folks around
Hmm.
me just to be able to process, to be able to
Yeah.
kind of say, all right, Beth, no, this is where I think you could have done something differently, or you're being too hard on yourself, or it didn't quite work out. So I've had some challenging events over the summer. It seemed like June, July, and August all met a challenge for me, and some of which
Mm.
I contributed to. So being able to either have people on the road with me or that person I could call afterwards,
Mm.
that's how I sustain myself, is just being able to process and to take ownership. Like I feel 1,000 times better when I said something very snarky. I did like the thing I tell people never to do, and I got sarcastic and I got easily. And the next morning when I started with an apology, and there were some folks who were like, no, I think you're being too hard on yourself. But there was someone who came up to me and said, I was offended by what you said. And nobody ever takes responsibility. So thank you.
Aw.
And she gave me this big hug. And I'm like, okay, well, even if you were the only one, that made me feel better, which
Yeah.
now I can bounce back and not carry this thing with me forever because I did take ownership. So processing, owning when it's mine, and also being able to put it back on others when I don't think it's on me, right? So that
Yeah.
accountability piece coming
Hmm.
back. So
That's
Awesome.
what Beth is talking about is what we said earlier about being restorative with yourself, right?
Yeah.
Where do I hold myself accountable? Where do I give myself the support that I need? So for me personally, I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I am often too, if we're looking at that balance between accountability and support, I'm holding myself too accountable, not giving myself enough sort of compassion.
Same.
Yeah. So I have to start to get, as Beth is saying, real about that. And is there something I need to own? And if so, do it. But also, it doesn't have to be perfect, and nothing will ever be perfect. And you can't
Right.
control the people all the time, right? And so, if I can put my head on the pillow at the end of the day and be like, you know what, I centered relationships, I treated people with respect, I did the best I could.
That's it. That's all you can do, right? The
Yeah.
best that we can. And yeah, so we've got a group of folks who are listening today that are student life professionals and they are doing this work. It's hard and they are persevering through all the things that are happening. Where do you all see opportunities for schools to better support student life professionals who are trying to not only just lead restorative change, but just keep the ships above water and the glue that holds the school together. These are these folks working behind the scenes really hard to do this work. And so, what would you say to administration about how they can better support student life professionals?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say that this is a priority. That sort of you described as the glue that's holding the things together, right? So, how students and adults are engaging with each other is so important. So, a perfect example of where this work can come in handy is, for instance, boarding schools, right? There's a
Hmm.
huge potential for restorative practices in especially residence life.
Yeah.
We can be training prefects to build community on the floor, to have activities that help everyone get to know each other and understand each other a little bit better, to help prefects on their own handle low level conflicts, and teach others, right? The students themselves to handle those low level conflicts. So building those skills, those relationship and conflict management skills among our students, I'd say is key.
Hmm.
In day schools, of course, relationships and the potential for relationships to break down is everywhere. I mean, classrooms, sports fields, clubs, arts. So when a school can prioritize a relational mindset, and the practices that enhance a relational mindset, then students typically respond really positively. Because it's funny, the students will get along before the adults will. Students will
Right.
immediately say, "Oh, this feels fair. This feels right. This feels like I have an opportunity to say what I needed to say." Right. And so they understand that and they will then often take it upon themselves to either have a restorative conversation or seek out an adult to mediate one. And so when those conflicts are handled quickly and successfully, it allows those uncomfortable feelings to dissipate and
Right.
kids can just get back to enjoying their time together. I don't know about you, but I know if I have, I don't know, beef with someone, I don't know if that's still a thing that people are saying, but
It is.
if I have, like, if I have that one person that when I see them, I'm like, oh, like I don't want to engage. I don't want to be in a conversation. I'm going to go sit on the other side of the room. That impacts my entire experience, right?
Yeah.
So to be able to process that, get past it, and maybe even create a bond from the conflict that we had, because now we understand each other a little bit better.
Yeah.
That's key.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think giving, Julia, you said make it a priority. Are there times these folks are already meeting to give them space to communicate and learn from one another and practice? So we talk a lot about putting theory into practice. Like, this is great training and graduate programs and certificates, but what does it look like? I think that is one of the things I appreciate about our work in particular, is that it is practical and it goes to that silo versus an opportunity for adults working together. So if there are existing PLCs happening, can some of that time be given to this work? Right. And how are we implementing this? What is this looking like in all areas, right? But in particular student life.
I love that. And so, as we think about wrapping up today, you talk about one leadership lesson you've learned the hard way that continues to shape how you lead and work with people today.
Yeah, mine, I always kind of half joke when I say this, but it's true. One of my first leadership roles, my supervisor, who's still I still in contact with, the lesson was you're not that important.
Mm.
Like the world is going to keep spinning whether you are here or not. So
Yeah, that's true.
never be the only person who knows how to do something. And the more I take on and don't allow others to, like, if I'm afraid to go on vacation because, oh my gosh, everything's gonna fall
Fall
apart, then
apart.
not allowing others to grow. I'm holding a spot. And there was a transition period for me between our model programs and coming to IIRP full time. I was still in a leadership role, and the executive director at the time was like, Beth, like, I think you're great. Like, we love having you, but like, make a decision here. Like, fish or cut bait. And
Yeah.
it really hit me. And again, it goes back to that, like, I shouldn't be the only person who can do something, or I'm not that important. He said, you not moving on means someone here can't grow
Can't
into
move
it.
up. Hmm.
So are you a placeholder, or are you in or are you out? So it was a really hard decision, but it was so helpful in realizing just my space, like how much space am I taking up? And I don't always realize that. So it's probably more than one, but it's less about me than others than it is about others, I guess, is the takeaway.
Fair enough. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
How about you, Julia?
Yeah, I think for me, it's so I've mentioned mindsets a few times today,
Hmm.
and this is something I've learned and I'm still working on, and that is transitioning from that transactional mindset as a leader of we have to get stuff done
Right.
to a relational mindset where connection is the priority, even if we don't quite get everything done, even if what we do get done isn't perfect. So, because I know, and I don't have one story like Beth just shared, I have a million little examples.
Mhm.
I did prioritize tasks over people, and in the end felt horrible because yeah, the task was done, but at the expense of perhaps not listening to someone who needed to be listened to, right? Or not
Wow.
deepening a relationship that there was opportunity there to deepen. And so, like I said, I'm still struggling with that a little bit. When I get overwhelmed, I'm still, what do I have to do? Let's skip that check-in because we have work to do, right? Focusing on the relationship really should be the work, in my opinion.
Nice. So, if you guys could wave a magic wand and change one thing about how schools approach student life, what would it be?
I love the magic wand. I often ask this question in training and in coaching. For me, it's that authentic education isn't going to happen. It's not going to be effective. It's not going to occur until everyone feels that their thoughts and feelings and opinions matter,
Matter.
and we need to create the space for them to be expressed. So whether that's the students, the adults, the parents, the administrators, all of the above, that we just need to create that space.
Yeah. And just to kind of follow up what Julia said, it is just allowing for voice at every level. I think in particular, when we're talking about the students, my magic wand would be to think beyond content, not to the detriment of learning. We are
Sure.
in school, we need to learn, and there's a reason for that, but rather allowing students to learn not just the academic side, but how to communicate and build connections. I think that's lacking more and more. And
Yes.
that would be my magic wand. Find a way to fit in those community building skills.
Community is so important. Community building, relationship building. I think we have maybe the pendulum has swung a little bit too far to the left in terms of being an individual. I'm like, at what expense? We need to kind of bring it back in. That was awesome. Thank you guys so much. And so, for those folks who hadn't heard of IRP before, do you guys want to talk a little bit about the organization and what is offered? I'm getting my master's, but there's certificate programs, there's train the trainer, there's all sorts of things. So, how about you guys talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I can talk a little bit about our for credit, and Julia, maybe you can tackle some of the not for credit. So, as Bridget mentioned, she's coming to the end of her Master of Science. Are you doing a specialization?
I am
Or
not.
okay, so that's one of our offers. So we have a Master of Science in RP, 30 credits. I think it's pretty feasible to do and to 2.5 years. It is certainly for working professionals. We have 2 specializations along with that, one in education and one in community engagement. And if a master's degree is not really what you're looking for, we have a couple certificate options. So one is the certificate in restorative practices. It's a bit of a choose your own adventure. There's 2 required courses, 2 options. And then we have one in facilitating relational trauma. So it's a very hands-on certificate to help others to move through their trauma as well as your own, that facilitation. And then one certificate that I'm currently enrolled in myself is change implementation, which has been, again, I mentioned earlier about implementation science. There's so many pieces to it. So it's been very helpful to learn more about what happens after the training. And then also, if you are looking for just a little bit more, we have a thesis option where it's 36 credits, but you have an opportunity to design some research and do some research in your field. So those, I think I covered all of our 4 credit offerings.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then I think what's so great about the IRP is we have a really robust not-for-credit or continuing education arm of the institution. And so that can look like multiple things. We have many offerings that we offer what we call publicly. And what that means is that we're basically holding the party, and you can show up as an independent person or with a small team, and you can learn about foundations of restorative practices. You can learn about conferencing. You can learn about listening circles. You can learn about, I won't name them all there. We'll send people a website hopefully, but many different things that they can learn about. But also what's very cool, in my opinion, about our continuing education is that we also do private events. And so what that means is if someone does come to a public event and says, wow, this was amazing, I wish everyone I worked with could have this experience, they can. Because we can come and we can deliver it at a school. With independent schools, especially where I'm seeing interest is in, of course, the foundational training of like, what is this? What's the language? What are the theories and practices? But then, of course, the follow-up. So like, what's next? And so we do have an event called Putting Theory into Practice. And so we can do that in person or online. And independent schools seem to really appreciate that sort of next step, because they want the freedom and agency to be able to dabble and to think about where they can apply what they're learning, but they don't want to be going rogue, right? They want to have someone who's still there who can be like, yeah, that's a great idea, or have you thought about this? So that event is popular. Listening circles is another popular one that I already mentioned. And there's one that we just developed that I'm incredibly excited about, and it focuses on workplace conflict. So all of these discussions we were having about the adults, I anticipate that this will be one that will be popular among independent schools as well.
Awesome. So thank you for that. Now, before we wrap, a little bit of a lightning round if you guys are up to it. Just say the first thing that comes to mind. This is not too deep at this point. So, are you guys ready? All right. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee, both?
Mhm.
Coffee.
Okay. A book that shaped your thinking about leadership or community?
Oh, God. On Becoming a Leader, an oldie but a goodie, Warren Bennis.
Got it.
I hate it because I can never remember the names of books. Actually, believe it or not, I'm going to go with the 4 Agreements.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you weren't doing restorative work, what would you be doing instead?
I'd love to be cooking somewhere for people.
Ooh. I'd be writing.
Awesome. One word that describes what restorative practices means to you right now.
Life.
Connection.
Awesome. That was great, ladies. Thank you so much. Loved having you on today. So happy I had the opportunity to highlight the IRP and what folks are doing there. It's certainly changed the trajectory in my career. So I'm very appreciative to the IRP and thankful to both of you. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So thanks for pulling up a chair at the table today. I hope this conversation gave you something to think about, or maybe even something to try out in your own community. Beth and Julia reminded us that belonging isn't built in a day, it's built in every day. Through the small moments of listening, the courage to repair, and the belief that relationships are the curriculum. If you're enjoying the table, don't forget to subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave us a comment. It really helps more people find us. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time at the table. Have a good one.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Table Podcast Series. Is your student life program delivering on your mission? Our new K-12 student life assessment moves you beyond anecdotes to evidence-based decisions. Through comprehensive stakeholder surveys and expert analysis, you'll get concrete insights across 8 essential dimensions of student life, from culture and wellness to staff effectiveness and resource allocation. We're seeking founding partner schools to be the first to experience this transformative assessment process and help shape the future of student life evaluation. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Julia Getty and Beth Small, produced and edited by Andrick Sigmund, and music by PremiumBeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And, as always, thanks again for listening.